members of council, members of the executive management, members of council, members of the executive management, members of Senate, our inaugurand this afternoon, Professor Dipane Hlalele, family and friends of Professor Hlalele, academics and professional staff, students, alumni, colleagues from higher education institutions locally and internationally, members of the community, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Untitled Chapter. I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor and Head of the College of Humanities. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Nana Poku, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural lecture of Professor Dipane Hlalele. The Vice Chancellor conveys his congratulations and best wishes to Professor Hlalele. Inaugural lectures form part of the university's public lecture series and may only be presented by newly appointed full professors who have been appointed in academic schools and centers. Inaugural lectures present an opportunity for showcasing the exciting and groundbreaking research and teaching being carried out by our professors in our university. Each lecture represents a significant milestone in an academic's career, providing official recognition of their promotion or appointment to full professor. These lectures are furthermore an ideal opportunity for new professors to introduce themselves and to present an overview of their own contribution to the field and their contribution also to their academic peers, students, and research collaborators. Inaugural lectures are also a platform for celebrating a professor's academic achievements with his and her family, friends, mentors, and colleagues. It is my pleasure to introduce our Dean and Head of School, Professor Thabo Msibi, who will now formally introduce the inaugurand, Professor Hlalele.
Deputy Vice Chancellor and Head of the College of Humanities, Professor Untitled Chapter. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say all protocols observed, a very good afternoon. It is incredibly opportune that we celebrate one of the giants in education on this day, the World Teachers' Day. Ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate the son of the soil, a compassionate and quiet trailblazer of note, who has come to redefine the field of rural education as well as community engagement. Dipane Hlalele is a professor in the School of Education here at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. who is a C2-rated researcher and who also appears in the World 100 Education Scientists in South Africa that was published by AD Scientific Index in 2022. Professor Hlalele has the following qualifications. He's got a BA in Education from the University of the North. He's got a B.Ed, an M.Ed, an M.A., as well as a PhD, all obtained at the University of the Free State. Prior to joining UKZN as an associate professor, he was an assistant dean as well as a senior lecturer at the University of the Free State. He also served as a College of Education lecturer, as well as being a deputy principal in a school and a teacher. He has been principal and co-principal investigator in a number of research projects. For example, the Community Engagement in Rural Contexts, a relational leadership strategy project that was between 2017 and 2019, and the Sustainable Urban Rural Learning Connections project from 2017 to 2018. Both these projects were funded by the NRF. Prior to completing these projects, he also was a principal investigator in a project entitled Sustainable Rural Learning Ecologies, Sustainable Futures for the People of the Afro-Montane, and a co-investigator in the Adaptive Leadership in Community Engagement and Service Learning projects. All of these projects were also funded by the NRF, respectively. The accrued value of this project is 2.7 million rand. He has supervised 27 PhD students, as well as 26 master's students up to completion. He has hosted 5 postdoctoral research and 1 teaching fellows, and has published over 55 articles, peer-reviewed conference proceedings, and book chapters. He has examined over 100 theses and dissertations from 16 South African universities and 2 international universities. His current research interest draws from positive and community psychology, as well as education, and he therefore strives and advocates for helpful, hopeful, and respectful research. He currently sits on the editorial board of the Journal of Education, Journal of Education Studies, as well as the Australian and International Journal of Rural Education. He is also currently the ethics chair for the Human and Social Sciences Research Ethics Committee here at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Clearly a distinguished scholar of note. Let me present to you, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Dipane Hlalele, who's going to present an inaugural lecture entitled Sustainable Rural Learning Ecologies, a Critical Analysis. Professor Hlalele.
Thank you very much, Professor Msivi and Professor Mkhize. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm sure you can hear me, but let me start from the beginning. This is the area called Makening in Kwakwa. And that's not the reason why I'm showing it to you. The reason I'm showing it to you, I'm showing you where my substandard A classroom was. So you can see there's a secondary school there and a primary school. That's where I started schooling at this primary school. And between these 2 schools, there is a sports field. And on the edges of this sports field, you can see trees there. So one of those trees was my substandard A classroom. So I was taught by those teachers who are now referred to as ill-qualified, underqualified, inappropriately qualified, and so on. They are called names, but they are those teachers. I'm very proud that today I'm here with you. Those teachers contributed to my success. This one, I like it very much. I like this slide very much. I think some of you have seen it before, but I like it because it encapsulates the environment or the feeling within which professors navigate their trade, or apply their trade. You can see in front of the professor there very few dissertations and theses of students that graduated. After having supervised many, but we have very few that have graduated. On the left-hand side of the professor, I would presume that the readings that were done, and behind the professor there, those were rejections. And I would imagine that the acceptances are very few and they are on the floor, and therefore you can't even see them. I always appreciate the narrowing of the path to the professor's desk. And my good colleague there, Dr. Mtiani, was talking about my hair when we recently had the graduation ceremony. That my hair is also suffering the same fate as that of the professor. Why rural education? President Nelson Mandela summarized the deprivation, isolation, poverty, and fragmentation and challenges that the post-1994 government had to tackle as follows. I've often said that the most profound challenges to South Africa's development and democracy can be found in its rural hinterlands. These areas, systematically and intentionally deprived of the most basic resources under apartheid, continue to lag behind the rest of the country in the post-apartheid era. That was the former President Nelson Mandela lamenting the current situation. Another president, President Zuma, said this: working together with our people in the rural areas, we will ensure a comprehensive rural development strategy linked to land and agrarian reform and food security as our third priority. That was during the State of the Nation address in 2009. Historically, some of the scholars, Ngambule, Balfo, Pillay, and Molezani, they will say historically, rurality and rural education have been marginalized bodies of knowledge, and little is known of the focus of the various studies and the state of rural education and rural education research. You can also see my good friends from good Australian friends, John Gunther, John Halsey, and Reed, and Corbett, and so on, from Australia, who have their own association called SPERA, Society for the Provision of Rural Education in Australia. They work very hard on the realization of that rural education. The Department of Basic Education in 2010 stated that just over half of South Africa's children, that is 54%, live in rural households, and which translates into almost 10 million children. We would know that in South Africa, the provinces that are in the majority rural provinces are KZN, Eastern Cape, and Limpopo provinces. So my research and other scholars' research in rural education is not based on a limited scope. It's a very vast scope that we must deal with. And then somewhere in 2017, I was part of a team, small team, not more than 10 scholars from South African universities and the Center for Education Policy Development, led by Professor William Lezani. We developed a draft rural education policy, which was gazetted. We don't know where that is now. But we did that over many months, and the policy strived to provide a framework for the development of context-specific, relevant, and sustainable strategies to deal with the challenges in rural schools, whilst drawing on strengths in rural communities, and B, improving the quality of education in rural schools that will allow the creation of appropriate strategies and practical interventions to improve the quality of education in rural schools. Where did it all begin? Now that I was based at universities, you are not only expected to be a teacher, but you're also expected to be a researcher. And I was placed in a corner by the then management at the University of the Free State to say, can't you do something? Can't you find a theme, research theme to keep your team going? Otherwise, if you are working alone, then it's the work of one person, and the others are not benefiting in terms of capacitation. So in 2011, we had an inaugural annual Sustainable Rural Learning Ecologies colloquium. So we worked very hard with Professor Sichaba Mashomahulu, who was leading a project called Sustainable Learning Environments Project with that research group, which started in 2008. And we were precise to say we are not going to replicate what is done by the sister research group. We are going to have our own focus. Then our focus was sustainable rural learning ecologies. The vision there was to conduct helpful, hopeful, and respectful research in rural contexts. Maybe in future I can have a lecture on what I mean by these three foods. How do you conduct a respectful research in rural contexts? How do you conduct hopeful research and helpful research in rural contexts? And that we have had many achievements over the years: publications, graduated students, collaborations, and so on. In the media, back then, when we were trying to conceptualize the sustainable rural learning ecologies, I was looking all over for information that can inform us in order for us to say we have a research team or we have a research agenda that we can pursue. You can see on your left-hand side, you see there the learners there in an open theater. They reminded me of my sub-A classroom where it was under a tree. Well, these ones are not under trees. And then the second one, it shows the teacher battling with the chalkboard there, which is not necessarily the duty of the teacher. The duty of the teacher is to be there and teach, provide quality education instead of battling with the chalkboards. And the point I'm making with the third one, this school is located in the Eastern Cape in a tornado-prone area. But whenever authorities come, bureaucrats come, they build the school, same ground, same area, where there are tornadoes, frequent tornadoes there. And you see, that's the problem with bureaucracy, because the local context and local knowledges are ignored there, because the people who stay in the area have it from experience that the area is prone to tornadoes and they can destroy the schools and structures. And then way back in 2012, they were looking in Australia, those good friends of mine were looking for someone from the Southern African subcontinent that can talk to them about the rural education in our contexts. And somebody said, there is your guy. So they invited me, you know, when they invite you, it's nice because they pay for everything. So they invited me there. I was here in an Aboriginal community for some time, enjoying kangaroo meat and so on. And you can see the paintings here. These paintings, they take the soil from the ground, and in their belief, they are connected to the land. And if they do this to you, this ritual to you, you owe them a return trip. So I still owe them a return trip to go to that Aboriginal community. Soon after that, the Nordic Africa Institute gave me a scholarship to stay there for some months. The Nordic Africa Institute is an institute based in Uppsala, Sweden. What they do is they do research on Africa. They have European-based researchers who only specialize in research in Africa. They don't research anything in Europe. They also bring in scholars from the African continent. So I was lucky to be one of those. And I'm told that my application stood out of 80 other applications. And then I had the privilege of visiting one of their rural schools, two of their rural schools. I'm not sure if you can see, but there's a rural school which is a high school next to each other there. If you can see there, that one is the primary school, and this one is the administrative block there, and then this one is the secondary school. This is a rural village called Österbola in Sweden. It's about 1 hour away from the town of Uppsala. And around here is your bus rank. The bus there comes by the hour, on the hour, without fail. It's not like in our context. So this is a highly organized rural learning ecology, because it has all the facilities that you can think of and all the benefits that you can think of that in South Africa, rural people do not necessarily enjoy or are exposed to. But what the lesson that I learned from visiting rural schools in the place, that there are common trends. One of those is the mismatch between the content that is taught in schools and the context. You'll find that there are those children that whose intention is to be in farming, but farming or agriculture is not taught at school. They are taught those subjects that will take them away from the rural context to the urban context. The same applies to South African rural schools. Many of them, we teach them to be in urban areas. And then to strengthen my case, I also, this is a magazine at my former university. So I also contributed this piece, and I'm sure you can relate to this handsome guy here. I contributed this piece with an emphasis on sustainability and rurality as drivers of education research. And recently, I was invited by the Peruvian Education Research Association to present on our issues in rural education in South Africa. Yeah, the trip lasted 48 hours, so it was quite a lot. And there was a problem of language there. They speak Spanish, and it took a long time in translation. Yeah, but we also have similar problems, but theirs are much more worse if you look at the distances they travel to into those rural schools. We intentionally tried to depart from deficit paradigms. I'm sure there's a lot of literature that talks about, speaks about deficit paradigms. When it comes to rural areas or rurality, it is only known for the negative things and not the assets or capacities that are there. We also are moving away from having routine or singular problem-solving approaches. If this one works there, what worked there in that particular community, rural community, it should work here. Or if it worked elsewhere in an urban area, it should work here. We now understand that there's a multiplicity of ways to creating and achieving sustainable rural learning ecologies. Sustainability is seen as a process rather than an outcome. And we are aware that there are tensions and contestations. Those may be in the form of power, beliefs, existential needs, and so on. And then we acknowledge that we are dealing with pervasive practices that condone or still advocate for unsustainability in rural learning ecologies. The theoretical underpinnings, I will go through them very quickly so that I don't take much time. But positive psychology, I think you heard about it. It emphasizes positive human functioning and flourishing on various levels. Instead of looking at the problems that we have, we look at how we function in positive ways. And those are many. It's just that humanity is more inclined to being negative. And social justice, which means parity of participation and adaptive leadership, meaning you don't understand the problem until the community, you sit down with the community and you try and conceptualize the problem. So there's collective ownership of the problem that is to be researched, the process, and the outcome or the solution. So that one is known. You're not flying in there and then collecting your data and flying out. Relationality is also a very important one. Relationality, it's also works for positive change, unapologetically so, it works for positive change. It's inclusive in nature and ethical, and it's process-oriented and empowering. I know some will not like that, but it deals with issues of power in a very deliberate way. Servant leadership, a philosophy and set of practices that enrich lives of individuals, build better organizations, and create a more just and caring world. I'm sure you have heard about the dead white European men and their story. And then critical diversity literacy, we also try to ponder issues of power, privilege, prejudice, and constructions of difference when we deal with rural learning ecologies. Critical consciousness or critical emancipatory research, power versus oppression, how do we deal with such? Sustainable rural learning ecologies, the research agenda there, Callaway, a long time ago, lamented the tendency to dismiss educational initiatives that seek to make direct interventions into issues of development as attempts to control and subordinate rural people to the colonial order. There was a very important development post-94 of emerging voices that focused on rural communities and schools, with the development of rural livelihoods that are sustainable in mind. And the neighbor of Sweden, in Finland, they also rely on the local school to engage itself in the local community events and to cooperate with other public sectors, organizations, and people. And in other words, instead of just focusing on the educational function that the rural school can perform, they also add other functions in the community. So not only is the school expected to function as a social agent and to support the social cohesion of the village, but also emphasis is placed on encouraging learners to choose responsible, action-oriented strategies which will solve concrete problems in the local area. Right there, I'm just showing her the monies and then what I did with the monies, and then you can see the first one. After a few years of toiling with the concept of sustainable rural learning ecologies, which started in 2011, as you saw some of the earlier slides. In 2014, the NRF thought that this project was ripe and ready to be financed, to be funded. So they gave me that kind of money, and I did a lot of things with that money. A lot of colloquia, a lot of publications we had, a lot of international scholars I invited, staff development and student bursaries and so on. It looks like it's not a lot of money, but if you have it, you can do a lot with it. Adaptive leadership, I think I spoke when I did some theoretical reflection in the previous slide. Adaptive leadership, you don't know what the problem is until you sit down with the community and you deliberate on the problem and you understand what the problem is. The community may also is also expected to contribute to the process of finding the solution. Sustainable rural, urban rural learning connections, there we're trying to find out how the two urban and rural work, and then you still find that it's skewed towards the urban. The connections are skewed towards the urban, and the rural ecologists will have this external locus of control, which is the urban, and they think that their assistance will come from elsewhere outside of their own ecologies. And it also says, I think it also explains why we have so many informal settlements just outside of towns, because people think that their lives can never be complete unless they are associated with something urban. Even if it's just the name of the town. They left their rural ecologies where they were food secure, and then now they go to areas where they are food insecure. And then the Afro-Mountain, I think we think of mountains as, we don't think of mountains as some rural spaces, but I think they also contribute to rural spaces, so there were linkages there. Community engagement in rural context. This year was framed around a relational leadership model. And how do we engage communities as investors, rural communities as investors, in ways that are purposeful, that follow ethics, that are process-oriented, and so on. Here, I tried very hard to be cross-disciplinary, because there was somebody from zoology, somebody from sociology, and somebody from history. But as soon as the going got tougher, the other co-investigators will retreat to their comfort zones and then say, no, I'm in history, so I can't do it. So we achieved success, but not to my expectation. So, and then we also work together with there's a center here. I'm not showing all the pictures, but I'm just showing this small ground. This small ground was left by FIFA after the 2010 World Cup. It's called the FIFA 2010 Legacy Project. So it was left there in a particular rural community where I come from. So we work with them. They work with you. There's a soccer field there, and it's small and compact. They say for intimacy, like a soccer field will be much larger, and then this one is quite smaller, and you can play with a fewer players. But in the process, they also include life skills there, whether it's for youth or whether it's for adults. Sustainable future for the people of the Afro-Montane, I spoke about it a little bit. Some of the projects included children's literacy prowess, where we explored the contribution of parents together with Save the Children South Africa. They also gave us a lot of money, but it stayed with them, so I did not include it here because the budget was with them, but they will just fund our activities. And then we also dealt with hospitalized children of school-going age. Some of them were hospitalized on a medium-term and long-term basis, so we dealt with those. We were not teaching them, but we were trying to reignite the spark or try to keep the thought of learning still burning with them, so that when they are in hospital, you still think that they still belong to school according to their age. And then Football for Hope, I spoke about it, and then there's I will speak about this one, the Diyatalawa Rural Learning Ecology. This one, I just like the picture on the left, the three, because it's one of my PhD students who went to an ecology that is headed by a traditional leader. So it just shows, I begged this student to write a paper, but I still have to have it. But it just shows how you enter the field to earn the trust and be able to generate richer data. So you can see on arrival, there was a mat, and then there was something on the head, and then the shoulders, and so on. And that's when you see the chief. The traditional leader. And later on, she graduated and then she was given a chair. Later on, she could remove the scarf from the head and then from the shoulders and so on. In this one project, that's where we also applied adaptive leadership. I'm sure you can relate to this handsome guy. That's where we could put adaptive leadership in practice. This one, we also didn't know what the problem was. The problem was shared with us by these leaders of the association. Types of these rural learning ecologies that we have, like we say, rural learning ecologies are diverse. You can see here during weekdays, these schools, there is some life at the school, but if you look at during the weekends, there is nobody there. So the nearest household is 2 kilometers away, and taxis are used there. I was informed that through our research that the rural allowance contributed to having this school sustainable over the years. They say rural allowance is one of the factors that contribute to teachers even mobilize for learners to come in and enroll there. This is the Diyatalawa that I was talking about. This one is the government agencies. There are two projects in South Africa. One is this Diyatalawa, which is in the Free State, and Moyesha, which is in Limpopo. So on your right there is a center where you have these agricultural projects. If you use this road, and then you will reach this area. So this one, the houses were built by the community. There's 51 houses there. And then there's a teacher's cottage there, and then the preschool there, and then here is the school. This school has all the things you may think of: a computer lab, laboratory. It's a primary school, and it has residences. So residences, the learners stay here. Yeah, you know there will be many challenges with the young ones. Well, they still like to be attached to the caregiver or the parent, and now they are staying there. And what the government did was to employ from the 51 households here, 1 member per household, so that they work at the school for sustainability. So this is one model, but the school initially was there, and it moved to here, and then it's here. So this is one model of a sustainable rural learning ecology that we can think of. So you couple that with many other projects, not only the education one. This one, I just want to highlight the role of religion played in this one. This one is also very far away from the N3, 12 kilometers from the N3. And then they have a very good, I like this combination there. The principal is the wife of a deputy principal. So the deputy principal is the husband to the principal. And the deputy principal is a sub-branch official. Children attend school there. So this mix is fascinating. Maybe in future, I still have to analyze how these permutations work for sustainability in that rural learning ecology. And you'll know religion, because if it's a school characterized by a particular religion, parents trust those if they're belonging to that kind of church. They trust that, and then they know that their children will be well taken care of until they pass. And then there's a good network with the farmers there. And then there's this one in Jamaica. You have those fishing schools on your right. Not fishing school, fishing villages. But fishing is not taught in schools. But you have so many fishing villages. You can count them, many. There's one, in contrast, there's one in Australia in a place called Port Lincoln in South Australia. So there they don't take too many learners. They just take a certain number. All they deal with is maritime studies and fisheries. And this goes to show us why the unitarized system is disadvantageous. Some important points: out migration is there. The ideal rural teacher is what we need. And as with rural teachers, rural learners should also be in a position to choose certain careers. And a lot of research that was done mainly by those Australian friends of mine, and they have studies that are dealing with whether rural inhabitants are learning to live, learning to stay, or learning for choice. And they also have deal with studies that look at possibilities of returning to rural learning ecologies. In one of the papers that I published about the sense of community, if teachers have a heightened sense of community in rural learning ecologies, they also tend to participate in other activities other than just teaching, and they have a stronger sense of community and are less likely to leave. And they also make an immense contribution. The problem of context versus content versus context, I think I spoke about that. And there's a desire to map and maximize inherent assets in the rural learning ecologies, or providing responsive and demanding educational programs, recruiting and retaining highly qualified teachers. Now, the rural learning ecologies, I can see my time is running out. Rural learning ecologies are diverse, so one size fits all may not apply. in terms of assets, in terms of capacities, in terms of the constitution or the makeup of rural learning colleges, you can apply one principle. So in short, no two rural learning colleges are identical. So, and that. So we have to understand rural areas as natural. No. Understanding rural areas as natural or geophysical spaces is being challenged, because rural spaces are in some quarters defined by their natural or geophysical components. The government of South Africa, at least they view rurality to mean a way of life, a state of mind, and a culture which revolves around land. So if you are very careful, you will be able to see the behavior of a rural person. It's not like the behavior of a person from urban context. Another scholar, Marsden's work, which earlier postulated rural areas as the productivist countryside. So Marsden earlier thought that rural learning colleges are there to produce food, productivist, produce food and other products. Yeah, that is the lens. It gave way now to a much more polyvalent or multifunctional rural space. So there are many functions that are taking place in rural spaces. The school is seen as the most important public institution in rural ecology and also represents the economic lifeblood of the area. And learning as an activity it takes place within, between, and across contexts. Therefore, in that way, it constitutes what we call a learning ecology. And it should be seen as an intricate web of coexistence. So whatever happens in the school affects what happens outside, and what happens outside affects what happens in the school. So it's an open system, it's dynamic, it's interdependent, it's diverse, it's partially self-organizing, adaptive, but most importantly, fragile. Yes, as I conclude, for a learning society, interpreting, understanding, and reflecting on its learning ecology first begins with contextual vision building. It cannot be done by an individual. In each ecology, individuals and collectives will come together to co-create their vision of how they want to live and learn together, both in the present and in the future. So the questions that we need to be asked are, who are we? What values are important to us? What are we going? Where are we going, and why? What kind of world do we want for our children and grandchildren? And later, how do we get there? On a lighter note, I had the pleasure of visiting a place called University of West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago. And then I saw this interesting notice. It is about the dress code. So these are not acceptable. When you get there, these are not hats for male and female, tank tops, vests, halter and strap tops, tops stopping above the waistline, shorts stopping above the knees, male and female, mini skirts, mini dresses, and dresses with mid-thigh slits, ultra low rise and tight jeans, male and female, clothing that are distressed or with cutouts, flip-flops or athletic slippers, pajamas, sleepwear, clothing that is transparent or semi-transparent. I acknowledge the following. The institutes, centers, and organizations: Nordic Africa Institute, International Research and Training Center for Rural Education in Beijing, China. I was there sometime in 2014, and it's based in it's a UNESCO Category 2 center, and it's based in at Beijing Normal University. I couldn't understand what is normal about that university. And the Cooperative Research Center for Remote Economic Participation in Australia, they are the ones that invited me, CRC rep. International Institute of Capacity Building in Africa. I was also there at some point in Addis Ababa. This one is a Category 1, UNESCO Category 1 center. The Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa, in Dakar, Senegal. I also happened to be there in 2014. University of the Free State, that's where I started with my career, and I enjoyed my academic freedom here. As much as I'm doing here at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, which I appreciate. The scholars and individuals, Professors Pumlani Mwende, the cap I'm wearing now, you know, your students, when they instruct you, that is disguised as a humble request. So he humbly requested that we exchange hands. I didn't know why he thought that his was the size of my head and mine was the size of his head. But yeah, he will explain it someday. Professor Muletsani, the Nadine Lange, those, they exposed us to a lot of rural education issues. And I know Professor Muletsani says we took rural education from them and then gave it another name. I think she must be proud that she was able to inspire us to be creative and think out of the box and come up with a new and exciting name. I'm almost done. And the others, and my students, there's many of them now, over 50 of them. I think they did very well for me to be here. My host at the Nordic Africa Institute was Shell Havnevich. Colleagues, friends, and family, I'm here with my son to give me strength. So that's okay. Thank you very much, Dean.
Professor Hlalele, thank you very much for that wonderful lecture this afternoon. We thank you very much for the opportunity to bring us into your world and for granting us access to your own academic journey throughout your career. Something stuck out for me as you were speaking, the way in which you were conceptualizing rurality or rural education. It's quite clear to me that the more we think about issues of rurality and rural education, is the more we have to think about the principle of social justice. It is, I think you captured it very nicely when you asked us about the kind of world that we want our children to live in the future. And I think that is something that we need to reflect on and think deeply about as we think about how to bring about a fair and equal society, a just society that offers equal opportunity for all. I was also touched by your reference that you made earlier on to this notion of a helpful, hopeful, and respectful research agenda, which I think that it's tied to notions of humanizing pedagogies or humanizing research that values individuals and sees individuals as assets as opposed to being deficient. And I think that is powerful in advocating for education that is inclusive and also an education that ensures that all our children, regardless of the backgrounds that they come from, that they indeed have a future and that they're given opportunities. So we want to thank you, Prof. Hlalele, for opening this world for us. We appreciate that very much. And we also want to extend our gratitude to your family. You've noted that you are with your son as we speak, who's located in your office. We know that they've been there with you throughout the transitionary episodes of your academic life. And we know that you've had, as you've indicated, an incredible sort of leadership and academic journey with a lot of responsibilities. And being an academic is not easy. And we want to thank the families for being able to stand with you whilst navigating this academic life. We commend them for supporting you throughout your glorious career. We are also delighted, and I'm certainly sure that they're very proud today that they're bearing witness to this history-defining moment. Prof. Hlalele, I'm not sure whether you are aware, but I just want to bring this reality to you, that you are one of only 2 Black African South African professors in the School of Education, and one of only 18 in the entire university. And the number gets more depressing if you look nationally and indeed internationally. So we want to commend you for reaching this incredible milestone, and it is a history-defining moment. Let me extend also gratitude to the Deputy Vice Chancellor and the head of the College of Humanities, Professor Nhlanhla Mkhize, for always supporting the work of the school and the work that Professor Hlalele has been undertaking, and of course, the range of colleagues that have worked with you, Prof. Hlalele, who've been collaborators, who've been students, and who've worked with you in a range of projects that you shared with us today. We want to thank them for their support and for their contributions in your journey. We note that many of the colleagues who were part of this lecture also joined us across the borders of the country, and they came from incredible projects in Australia and other parts of the world. We thank them for joining us this afternoon. Also, colleagues, want to thank the audience. We had about close to 80 individuals who attended today's lecture. I want to thank you for sitting there attentively and for supporting Professor Hlalele, the School of Education, the College of Humanities, and the university at large. Finally, of course, colleagues, as you would know, there are people in the background who are always making sure that events of this nature become a success. And in particular, I do want to pay particular gratitude to Ms. Pamela Adams, who has been communicating with all of us and making sure that this event is accordingly organized. We thank you, Pamela, for your hard work, and we appreciate that events of this nature would not be successful if there's not the people behind the background or who are working hard to make sure that they're successful. I thank also other colleagues from the CRT team, as well as colleagues from the Registrar's Office, the ICT team, and other support divisions of the university who've ensured that this lecture is a success. Colleagues, family members, guests, we would usually invite you at the stage to join us for a meal. Unfortunately, we are actually doing this lecture online, as has been the case for the last couple of years, and we are unable to invite you to a meal. We are hopeful, however, that in future we're going to have these lectures physically so that we can actually engage with the inaugurant and also have a meal afterwards. For now, I'm inviting you to get a glass of wine, champagne in your homes, and celebrate a toast to Professor Dipane Hlalele for his history-defining inaugural. On behalf of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, I wish you a very good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. It's good.
Prof. Hlalele, well done. Congratulations. Colleagues, thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful. We're very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Msibi. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Hlalele. Congrats again and well done. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.